Hello and welcome to Cyclone Inciders. As always, my name is Hawn, host of Cyclone Incyders, and alongside me for the first time this semester, I have Brcka and Rachel Given. Guys, how's it going?
Doing well. How are you?
Well? I'm doing pretty good. You know, we just had a great news watch here at ICTV. Now shifting things over to sports. Rachel, how are you going? How are you doing?
I'm doing really good.
You good?
Yeah.
Okay. And so let's just start to dive into it. Recap Iowa State's weekend in sports. We'll start with Friday. The Iowa State women had a soccer game against Oklahoma. Unfortunately, they lost with a score of 3-0. We'll talk about volleyball here at Hilton against West Virginia when they went 5 sets, winning 3-2. Also on Friday, we have the swim and dive alumni and gold meet. Rachel, you kind of follow the swim and dive team. You have been with them for a little bit of time now. Tell us a little about the team, and then tell us a little bit about the alumni call and gold meet and how it went.
Sure. The Iowa State swim and dive team has a Cardinal and Gold alumni meet every year. This year is a little different. They had 8 freshmen come onto the squad this year, and so they really got to prove themselves this past weekend on Friday. And Keely was a freshman, and she won two first place meets, and she did really well in her races. And so I think the coaches were excited to see her do so well, but they also weren't kind of expecting it as a freshman, definitely in her first collegiate meet. So they did really well. The Cardinal team came out on top, of course, but the gold team was kind of not too far behind either. So both teams were equally set up in the lineup, and they did both really well. And so we're looking into Nebraska coming up this weekend at home. So that's always a really good meet. Nebraska is always pretty head-to-head in our skill level with Iowa State. And Kelly Nordell is the assistant swim coach. She used to be the assistant swim coach at Nebraska. So it's kind of
so a little bit of revenge, maybe revenge meet. I get that.
Yeah.
You said there's a lot of experience coming to this year.
Yeah.
What are the swim and dive leaders that are returning, and then how are they looking towards the freshmen in improving?
Definitely. So Becky is a diver for the Iowa State diving team, and she has always kind of been the motherly person on the team. And so she just kind of takes all the divers under her wings. And while there's only one diving freshman that's new, she's just kind of been taking her under her wing and helping her with the collegiate different levels besides high school and moving her up into the collegiate level. So.
Well, I'm very excited about the swim and dive meet season. I'm sure all of us here is as well. So let's move on though. Saturday, we had Iowa State had a game against Baylor here at Jack Trice. Really heartbreaking loss. We'll talk more about that later on in this show. So let's move on. Saturday, we had a doubleheader with softball. Iowa State played UNI and also Drake in the All Iowa Classic, and then had Iowa on Sunday to really round things off. But like I said, let's kind of dive into volleyball. Going against West Virginia in 5 sets. First off, how is the season progressing so far? I know we have a lot of talent, Jess Shaven and company. They're doing really well. We actually saw Jess Shaven win Big 12 Offensive Player of the Week. Brian, we all know Jess Shaven's a phenomenal player, but how was she really able to win this kind of award?
I mean, 26 kills is what did it.
In this past week, yeah.
And, you know, Big 12 Offensive Player of the Week's a big deal, obviously.
Very big, yeah.
Her coaches after the game had nothing but good things to say about her. So she was just in the zone. So.
And then looking at the season before, I guess the season as a whole, not just this game against West Virginia, how has Jess Shaven been leading this team to, I guess, where they're at right now?
Sure.
I know she is kind of the leader of the team along with Capella and more on the team, but Morgan Kurt. But talk about Shaven specifically, how she was able to win this prolific award, and then how she looks to continue it on for the rest of the season.
Sure. Shaven was actually the first person for Iowa State to break the Offensive Player of the Week Big 12 award since 2009, so it's really big for Iowa State this week. Also, Shaven was really killer as a freshman last year. And so this year she's kind of known what she's got to come into, knows what she needs to bring to the table, and she's just doing that. I mean, she can kill it, she can block, she can do anything that she really needs to do. And I think head coach Christy Johnson-Lynch understands the level that Shaven can actually bring to the table, and uses her for that in every single aspect that she can.
Yeah, I definitely agree. She is the leader of this team as a sophomore, and she looks to continue that. So let's talk about this West Virginia game a little bit. It went on to 5 sets. we were talking about this game earlier. We saw Iowa State volleyball kind of struggle early against TCU in their previous game. They didn't quite bring the defense in the first 2 sets, but were able to bring it back to go a full 5 sets. What was their defensive mentality going into this one, knowing that they weren't quite energetic to start the match, but yet knowing they needed a finish? What kind of mentality did they go into this West Virginia game?
They just went in, sorry about that.
No, you're all right.
They went in, and they usually, come out strong. Always come out strong.
I mean, it's Hilton. They want to start strong, especially at home. They didn't quite do that versus TCU, but how did they look versus West Virginia?
Against TCU can bring the defense, and they brought it to Hilton. So I think that kind of was a wake-up call for the Iowa State Cyclones. They just needed to bring that in all 5 sets, which is why it stretched out to 5 sets, because Iowa State was there offensively, but they were not there defensively against TCU. So going into West Virginia, they knew that West Virginia was a rebuilding squad, and that they needed to not take them easy, but also take them as a serious competitor. And I think they did that against West Virginia, and they kind of got a wake-up call in the 2nd and 3rd sets in Morgantown when they were losing. So I think it was a wake-up call, but I also believe that it really brought up the different offenses and defenses that Chrissy Johnson-Lynch can put up in the lineup.
Yeah, and West Virginia, I guess Iowa State with 7 aces opposed to West Virginia's 2. Was that really a focal point for the offense to come in? I know Kurt Morgan has 13 on the season. She's doing really well serving the ball. But are they looking to get aces just out the gate against this West Virginia team that has a strong defense in returning?
Well, I think at the beginning of the season, the Iowa State Cyclones kind of struggled with the serving, a lot of bad outside serves. And so I think during the few practices in the beginning of the season, they just kind of got another wake-up call saying that, hey, we need to serve really well. And I think Chrissy Johnson-Lynch really just like exploded on the serving side. And I think the players finally got it. Morgan Kurt's an awesome server. There's just a ton of people who have really just honed their skills in serving, and I think that's what really helped secure the win.
Yeah, definitely. And just another thing that really helped secure the win, ball movement for Iowa State, able to produce 12 more assists than West Virginia. Why is that? Where do they look to move the ball, and what kind of comes with it?
Sure. Setter Suzanne Horner is amazing at knowing where to put the ball, when to do it at the right times. And sometimes you'll just see her go up for that second touch, and she'll just throw it over the net, and nobody, even in the audience, knows that that's exactly what she does, and that's just how she gets the points for the team. And so I think Suzanne Horner is just a great asset to being a setter on the team.
Definitely. And congratulations to Iowa State for winning their first conference match of the year. Looking forward to the next 2 weeks. Iowa State has a really, really tough schedule ahead of them.
Yeah.
So we know all about Kansas and Texas as being powerhouses in volleyball. And with Big 12 play included, Iowa State, what does Iowa State want to do with these matches in terms of getting out there, going fast, starting these matches strong, knowing that they are 2 of the top 10 teams in the country?
Yeah, well, the Big 12 conference is huge, and all the volleyball teams in the conference are good no matter what. So I think that the TCU game was a wake-up call, especially at being at Hilton, was that they need to be better defensively. They have it offensively, and they, of course, need to work on their offense, but I think defense is where they really need to kill it to secure a win. So I think against Kansas and the upcoming other Big 12 matches, they just need to really bring defense to the game, and they could ultimately do a really well job.
Okay, so let's kind of dig in the minds of these coaches. Knowing you're going against 2 top 10 teams in the nation, what's your mentality heading into the game? Coach Brcka, let's hear it. As a volleyball coach, what are you telling your players to prepare them for these possibly 2 of the toughest matches this season back to back? What are you telling your girls out there?
My girls. Basically, you just gotta, you know that you're the underdog.
Yep.
So, I mean, don't treat it that way. It's the same as any other sport. Treat it as, you expect to win.
Yeah.
And you just got to go out there and play the best that you can.
I agree. Coach Givens, let's hear your take on it. If Iowa State goes out there and starts to, let's say, drop a goose egg, dropping 2 sets, how do you come back from that knowing you're the underdog?
Knowing you're the underdog, you just got to get back into the mentality that, yes, you're going to win, and you're going to play your hardest. And no matter what the outcome is, you know that you played the best you could. So So I think as a coach, I would just tell the team to not think about the losses as a loss and more of a way to rebound and get back onto the court as a team that she knows that she can play in.
Mm-hmm. Well, with that, we'll see how Iowa State volleyball fares coming up against number 6 Kansas this week. We'll take a short break. Following that break, we'll talk about this Baylor game that we all saw, the heartbreak we all witnessed, and more on that after the break. Welcome back to Cyclone Incyders on ICTV. First off, thank you to KOE Sports for that awesome commercial break they gave us. Some really good stuff. Make sure to catch their shows on 88.5. They also stream it online. Make sure you catch those. But we're here at Cyclone Incyders, so let's talk about Cyclone football. One of the just favorite sports for Cyclone fans all around, even though we don't have a great consistent team in and out every year. The fans come and they support. It was no more evident than this game versus Baylor we had last Saturday at Jack Trice. Iowa State had a very big crowd for what a lot of people expected and predicted to be a blowout. So let's talk about that. First impressions before the game started. What did you guys think going into that game?
I mean, Iowa State was obviously, not favored. But
I think it was about 18, 16.
Yeah,
around
like
there. The over/under was about 18 points for Baylor. So yeah, definitely underdogs there.
Yeah, but I mean, Iowa State obviously scored. They could score against San Jose State, and they just needed to do that again, and they did.
They definitely did. Rachel, what did you expect going into this game, and knowing that Iowa State won against San Jose State last week? Did you see things that they needed to improve on to head into Baylor in order to get a win?
I definitely saw some improvement. A team always needs to be improved, and I definitely think defensively Baylor is always going to be bigger than Iowa State. So
bigger and faster.
Definitely. So I think we needed to, first off, before the game even started, just know that defense, we're going to have to bring it. So.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And with that, for me, the thing that Iowa State needed to improve on from their win against San Jose State was just consistency at the line of scrimmage. We saw both Joel Lanning and Jacob Park come into that game. Jacob with 2 touchdown passes, Joel Lanning with 1, and they both had a different dynamic to the game. But what really helped both those quarterbacks produce, I thought, was consistency at the line of scrimmage that they didn't see in the previous few games. Senior Brian Bobek is the longest standing offensive lineman in that group, and with 4 other offensive linemen around him that are seniors, I think they have a really good foundation for them to continue on. And coming into the season, they did hear a lot about how unexperienced and just kind of lacking in depth they had at the line. I'm sure we all heard it, and we expected that, but what we've seen is that slight improvement week to week. And these past 2 games versus San Jose State and now into Baylor, did we see that with the offensive line? How did the offensive line stack up against the big Baylor front 7 that we know is terrifying?
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the biggest things you could see is the running game. We had 3 different runners between Warren, Montgomery, and Lanning who all had great games. And you can't do that without a line.
Definitely. So. And you're not going to run a running back 30 times without that line.
Exactly.
You're risking injury, you're risking fatigue, and really, if you're running the ball 30 times with a bad line, you're not going to get production. But we did see 130 yards out of Mike Warren in his first back-to-back 100-yard games of the season. Rachel, why did Warren see this kind of uptick in rushes, uptick in yards, the 2 touchdowns? Did they believe in him a little more, or was it kind of game flow?
I definitely think, not a diss on Mike Warren, but I think his smaller body could help him navigate his way through some of the bigger Baylor players. And so I definitely think that helped. And while Lanning had an awesome hot arm that Campbell just wanted to keep in the entire game, I think that the Lanning-Warren pack was just really great for the game, and he was able to slide in some ways that Baylor just obviously didn't block. So.
Yeah, I like what you said there. Warren was able to find those small holes to fit through. But let's kind of talk about that, because that's one thing I saw during the game that we could improve on. as an Iowa State offensive line. You said there were holes in the line that Warren was able to fit through, but when you have, I guess, a lack of depth at the offensive line position, you're not going to have that charge in the fourth quarter. I didn't see very many offensive linemen blocking downfield for Warren to break off more long runs. As we said earlier in the year, his longest run is of 14 yards, I think. In this past game, it was only 13 yards. They did a really good job of chipping away maybe 6 to 10 yards, but he wasn't able to break away, and I just think that comes down to more consistency in the offensive line, not being able to run downfield, get into the secondary, find the blocks down there, and that kind of hurt them, but at the same time, 30 rushes, 130 yards, 2 touchdowns. Very good day for Mike Warren. So let's move on. The quarterback situation and how Joel Lanning was able to put up 42 points in 3 quarters. We saw that they played 4 quarters versus San Jose State. They didn't want to let up because they knew that they had to, I guess, get the experience in for these players. What happened in this? Why did 3 quarters come from this Iowa State football team? Really good 3 quarters, but then we saw 2 3-and-outs. I think a 6-play, 17-yard drive in that fourth quarter. Why didn't we see a full 4 quarters, Brian?
There were a few different reasons. We got the 14-point lead.
Yeah.
And they instantly looked like they were comfortable, and you can't be comfortable. You
especially with Baylor,
top 25.
Especially with a top 25 team on the other end, and even that, regardless of who Iowa State is playing, I think that it's also on Iowa State, knowing that, hey, we haven't produced consistently all year. Why should we feel comfortable? Why should we let up? I definitely agree. They look like that, but continue.
Yeah. Another thing I noticed was David Montgomery had a good game.
He really did, yeah.
And then they didn't put him back in the second half. He played the first half, and you could see Mike Warren getting fatigued, getting tired, and so I don't know. That was a big part of it as well.
Yeah, I definitely saw that as well. The thing, David Montgomery also had a good game last week. He's continuing to have these solid games behind former All-Conference Mike Warren, but coming into this season, a lot of people heard the 3-headed monster: Joel Lanning, Alan Lazard, Mike Warren. Since Mike Warren didn't see the production he saw early in the season, and David Montgomery did get those touches, do you agree that he should be taken out in that crunch time, in that time when Mike Warren seemed a little tired, or did David Montgomery warrant more touches, especially since he is a change of pace? He's a little different than Mike Warren in terms of running style and size. Rachel, your take?
I definitely think that Montgomery should have had more playing time. He proved to be hot when he needed to be, and he succeeded in those times when he needed to succeed. So I think he did a great job while he was in, and while I think Mike Warren is also a really great player, I definitely think that he also needs time to rest. And if we want to see success out of him, he needs time to rest. So we need to put in a replacement in times of need.
I definitely agree. And so that's enough about the offensive side. We know we put up a lot of points. Let's talk about where Iowa State really needs to improve, really needs to look at their team this week in order to take on Oklahoma State next week. We'll talk about that more. But the defensive side gave up over 450 yards just on the ground against all-time leading rusher at Baylor, Shock Linwood. But not only that, the starter for Baylor actually is Terrence Williams, who also had a phenomenal game, also putting up, I think, 100, almost 30 yards and 2 touchdowns. 2 of these rushers were able to really just push it down Iowa State's throat. Is that more talent on the team? Are we, as Iowa State, not able to produce just the run-stopping guys that are big enough to stop? Or is this a thing that Iowa State coaches need to be looking at to fix in their game plan?
I think it's got to come on both ends. There were obviously holes all over the defense, but
literal holes.
Yeah, literal
there
holes.
Were some of the biggest gaps that I saw Shock Linwood run through, and it just baffles me how Iowa State knows that Baylor has these actually 3 capable runners. Really, we didn't see a lot of Seth Russell, but he was able to produce, I think, 50 yards. On the ground. He didn't pass the ball very well, but again, looking at Iowa State's defense rushing or defending the run, their quarterback was able to get 55 yards on the ground.
2 touchdowns.
2 touchdowns. The backup was able to get 250 yards on the ground. The starter was able to get 126 yards on the ground. Rachel, what is needed to be done in this week of practice? I guess also on into the future for these Iowa State coaches to tell their players, hey, we need to cut this out.
I think that the coaches need to just look at the lineups and see that Baylor is just gigantic and that we really just needed to bring more focus onto the defense this last weekend, and we needed to just look at the bigger teams ahead and see how we can block them better so we don't have those big holes again. So
yeah,
that's it.
And that really boils down in this run defense. The front seven of Iowa State really hasn't been showing up to a lot of the games. They have done a decent job. We saw a lot of goal line stands, maybe not a lot, but we saw some very important goal line stands that I'd like to talk about. Iowa State shutting down Southwest at the goal line. It's not just the front seven that's able to do it. I saw a lot of the secondary, a lot of the DBs come in, especially Kamari Cotton-Moya.
Yeah.
He looks a lot more polished than he did last year. He looks like he's showing that flashes of what he was able to do as a freshman, earning freshman honors for Big 12 honors. Opposite that, Jamal Waltz, Brian Peavy, they've done a really good job. They're maybe not known as shutdown corners, but they've done a really good job in the run game, especially since the front seven is struggling. What do you have to talk about on the front seven and their struggles throughout the season so far?
I mean, you know, how many yards was it? 450?
450, yeah. It's not pretty.
Yeah, you have to stop that. That's got to be number one. And Matt Campbell came out and said his number one thing is stopping the run. So, I mean, if that's what you're going to focus on, then you got to focus on it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And enough to talk about this game. Let's see some highlights from Emerson Sears and Amani Armstead as we roll what they had to see on Saturday.
On October 1st, Iowa State showed up ready to play a tough game against Baylor. Coming into this game, Baylor's record was 4-0, while Iowa State's record was 1-3. In the early stages of the game, Iowa State took the lead, which gave them confidence in their ability to win the game. In the early stages of the second quarter, Iowa State was in the lead 21-7. By halftime, the score was 28-21 Iowa State. Iowa State's defensive line was thrown around by Baylor in the second half. Midway through the fourth quarter, Baylor tied the game up at 42-42. At this point, Baylor seemed firmly in control. Baylor's kicker kicked a 19-yard field goal to win the game. Final score, 45-42 Baylor. Up next, Iowa State will travel to Oklahoma State on Saturday.
Well, thank you, Amani and Emerson, for those highlights. Let's break this game down a little bit more. Jacob Park, he did not see a snap. Is that more because of Joel Lanning's production and his positivity towards the rest of the game, or did Jacob Park just not seem like the right fit against his Baylor defense?
I think it was definitely Lanning. Lanning had a career game, and
Yeah.
that's the Joel. I went to high school with Joel Lanning.
Oh,
I was on a
whoa,
football team.
name dropper,
Yeah.
name dropper. All right, I went to high school with Kane Seeley. Brian, what do you want? Okay.
But that's the Joel Lanning I know. Is, I mean, he can pass, he can run, he can do it all. And so it was cool to see him back there again after a few games of maybe not so much. But I don't know, when you get that hot, I don't know how you take him out.
You really don't. And this two QB system has worked up to this point. I thought against San Jose State, against these other teams, primarily because none of these quarterbacks really stepped up to take that position. Now we see Joel Lanning. He's had such the 3 quarters that he played well in, and albeit he did play all right in the fourth quarter, I think it was a little more conservative play call than anything else in the fourth quarter. I wouldn't want to put that on Joel Lanning, but I think he did play well in 4 quarters of play. Does he earn himself a starting job yet, or are we looking for more Jacob Park in the future? Rachel?
I was never a fan of the 2-quarterback system, but Campbell has proved to me that he knows what he's doing and he knows how to put them into play when needed.
Yeah.
So I definitely think Joel Lanning has proved himself, at least in this past weekend, to play well in the quarterback position as a hot arm whenever he needed it. So I think he's proved himself.
Yeah, I like what you said there. You said Campbell put that 2 QB system when needed.
Yeah.
I definitely agree. It's not needed in every game. It's not needed with every team. Against this Baylor team, the fast players that Baylor has year in and year out, I definitely think Joel Lanning was the better choice to evade the defender, to evade the rush coming in from the front seven. But later on in the year, if you see a team that doesn't maybe like to rush as much, like to play the run where you can burn them deep, do you start Jacob Park, or do you just consider Joel Lanning your starter for the season and move on? How do you think Campbell should handle this?
If I were Campbell, I would basically, obviously Lanning starts. He starts the game. And you give him a few drives, see how he does. If he's hot, keep him in. If he's out or if he's not all there, put Park in a little bit if the team, the situation calls for it. And, if he gets hot, you keep him in there. They're both capable.
Yeah.
So,
And that's the thing with this quarterback system, looking for the hot hand, looking for whatever will work for this Iowa State team who, let's face it, hasn't had a lot of positivity this year. I think if you see a quarterback that's doing well, you just play him. I agree. So, Iowa State football going against OK State coming up this Saturday, 16.5-point underdog. The same point spread that Iowa State had against Baylor, and this time we're in Oklahoma. So let's talk about some matchups that you guys want to see. One matchup that I am really excited for, the pair of running backs that complements Mason Rudolph. Mason Rudolph, Oklahoma State's, I think, all-conference quarterback. He's throwing really well, only 2 interceptions to his 9 touchdowns on the year. But what complements that pass game so well are these 2 backs, very different in sizes. I think one, Renee Childs, coming in at 210, 215, while starter Justice Hill is only, I think, 180. It's a smaller guy, quicker guy. The 2 backs, change of pace backs that complement Mason Rudolph will have a field day against this Iowa State front 7 if Iowa State doesn't find a way to shut them down, and that's really a matchup that I'm excited for, because if Iowa State can't stop the run, then Iowa State's going to get the pass, and vice versa. And if they're able to find that median where they're the bend don't break kind of mentality, I think that's going to really improve Iowa State's chances of winning. What's the matchup you're looking forward to?
Mine is Matt Campbell versus Gundy.
Yes.
Gundy against Texas coached basically a perfect game.
Phenomenal game.
You can't find anything wrong with that. And Campbell, up until maybe the last few drives, coached a really good game against Baylor as well. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, Iowa State saw a lot of exotic play calls in that Baylor game, and it was warranted. I think Iowa State can't win that game on conservative play calls, waiting for their points to come. They needed to go get their points, and I think Matt Campbell did a really good job of doing that. So, Rachel, looking at OK State, is there anywhere on the team that you feel we can exploit as an Iowa State team?
Definitely. The 3 monster head, is that what you said?
3-headed monster,
Three-headed monster. I love that. Lanning, Warren, and who is it? Lazard. Yeah, we need to just work with them. They know what they're doing. They know what to do on the field. They just know how to put the ball into play to make it successful. And I definitely just think we need to pump that up more. Yeah,
starting that 3-headed monster, Lazard, Joel Lanning, and Mike Warren is definitely important, and that's something that Iowa State did during the Baylor game. They scored on their first 7 possessions.
Yeah,
First 7 possessions, they really started that game quick, and I agree, they need to find a way to do that this game, especially with Alan Lazard, who only saw 3 catches on the day versus Baylor. For Iowa State to put up that kind of point total, and if you were to tell me Lazard had 3 catches, no touchdowns, that shows that Iowa State has enough depth to put up points, and it shows that Iowa State doesn't necessarily need their all-conference player, knock on wood, I think he should be, all-conference receiver out there making all the plays. They have enough talent. Speaking of Trevor Ryan, Daly, we talked about Montgomery earlier. They have the depth out there to win more games, especially in this Big 12 conference that looks a little shaky. We'll talk about that now. Looking at the Big 12 for the rest of the year, we have some matchups that may be favorable, talking about Kansas, some matchups that I'm a little afraid for. Texas looks really good even though they just lost. Rachel, are there any Big 12 teams who've underperformed this year who you think are going to make the playoffs or who you're scared of for Iowa State to face?
Actually, I'm really looking forward to the K-State-Iowa State matchup coming up for our homecoming. I think K-State the same skill level as Iowa State, so I think that'll be a good matchup to see how both teams played both offensively and defensively. So I'm looking forward to that matchup.
Yeah, and then how about you, Brian? I know we have OK State coming up. They have really impressive wins against Pitt and Texas. They're a team that I'm looking forward to watching this coming week. I know I'm going to be watching that game a lot, but for you, previewing the rest of the year, who's the team that you're scared of? Who's the team that you think can potentially make college playoffs? Because let's face it, Big 12 teams, I don't know about this year. It doesn't look as strong as previous years when TCU was a powerhouse, Baylor as well.
I mean, my pick at the beginning of the year for like playoffs was Oklahoma. I think,
As with, I feel everybody,
everyone.
definitely.
I don't know that they really have a shot. 2 losses hurts quite a bit. West Virginia's still undefeated, but it's been close games.
Yeah,
and
definitely a lot of close games with West Virginia. I also talked about them a little bit. I just don't think West Virginia has enough in them to win those games because they have been really close this far.
As far as like scary matchups, still Oklahoma. 2 losses or not, I mean, they're a good team. So.
Yeah, I mean, you see Baker Mayfield out there, Samaje Perine, and if they're not producing points now in the year, I think they will find theirs later on in the year. They'll be dangerous, especially when we play them, I think, in November or December. So later in the year, and hopefully Iowa State can improve up to that point, but just beware, I do feel like Oklahoma will improve as well. They are way better than their 2-2 record shows. They're a team that maybe won't make the playoffs, but will still make a lot of noise in upsetting some teams this year. So we'll be looking forward to that. And I think that's all we have here for Cyclone Insiders. Make sure to stay tuned on Thursday as we have News Watch at 8, and then also an Ames Tonight at 9 featuring Laurel Feeks and the Ladies Lounge. So make sure you stay tuned for that. Have a great night, Ames.